All right. Good evening, everyone, for our remote session of Daf Yomi. We are on Daf Yud Bey's Amud Aleph 12a5. Our Daf Yomi is sponsored for the month by Michael Tzaidi in honor of making his first forthcoming siyum with our amazing shul in Horayos. Hatzlacha with making Aliyah in honor of his late father, Zohar ben Ruvain Zichron Levracha. And Daf Yomi for the month is also sponsored by Moshe and Susie Feder, Nishmas Mr. Feder's father, Aryeh ben Michal, whose yortzeit was on the 15th of Elul, and Le'iloi Nishmas Mrs. Feder's mother, Roiza Bas Simcha Cohen, whose yortzeit was on the 18th of Elul. And may their neshamos have an aliyah. And Daf Yomi for the week is sponsored by Rabbi Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi, B'schus Refuah Shlema for Rabbi Aaron's first cousin, Sarah Bat Aziza. Okay, we are at Tudat Tamashuach Bashem Mishcha. This was Brian's question yesterday about why is that we've been calling this Kohen the Mashuach, the Mashiach, all this time, and how do we know that he's not the king? So Tana Rabbanan, rabbis are Mashiach. It says the anointed one in the pasuk. Yochel Melech, the whole pasuk says Im Kohen Hamashiach Yecheta. If he's the Kohen, the anointed one who sins, Lashma Sa'am, right? So says Yachol Melech, we might think that the word Mashiach, anointed one, refers to the king. Talmud Lomar, therefore, the pasuk says Kohen. It says that he's the Kohen, the anointed Kohen. If you had only just written the word Kohen, so then Talmud Lomar, then it would have thought that it also applied to the Kohen who became the Kohen Gadol by putting on the 8 garments, vestments, as they say in art school, right? It's the 8 garments of the Kohen Gadol, and that's how he became Kohen Gadol, not by anointing. So Talmud Lomar Mashiach. Therefore, the pasuk says he's anointed. So therefore, he has to be the Kohen who is also anointed. If the qualification was being a Kohen who is anointed, we also anoint a Kohen to become the one who gives the speech before they go to war. So Talmud Lomar v'ha Kohen Hamashiach she'enu Mashiach al gabav. He is the Kohen who is anointed. That there's nobody who is anointed on top of him. There's nobody who's above him. Okay, so my mashma. So what does that mean? How do you know that from the pasuk, v'hakohen Mashiach, the Kohen, who is anointed, how do you know that this means that he's the one who has nobody on top of him? That just says he's the Kohen who's anointed. So the answer is Kedama Rava. It's like Rava says, Ham Yerech Hamiyumenes Shabierech. The pasuk, when it talks about the Gira Nosha, the sciatic nerve that we don't eat, it calls it Hayerech, the thigh. And the Rava's explanation of that is that it refers to the thigh, meaning the right thigh, the one that is the stronger of the two. So according to him, there's only a prohibition of eating the right Gid Hanasha, not a prohibition of eating both. That's machlokas, but nevertheless, that's his view, and that's how he interprets it from the pasuk Ha-Yerech. So Achanami, that's how we're going to see it here. Ha-Mashiach, he is the anointed Kohen. Ha-Miyuman Shemeshuchem, he's the higher ranking of the anointed Kohanim. Amar Mar says, Mashiach, he's the anointed one. Yochel Melech, we would have thought that he's the king. What are you talking about? He's the king. Melech parhu demaisi. The king doesn't bring a bull, right? This pasuk tells us that. With the next pasuk, the next section talks about the offering that the king brings. That's a goat. Sierhu demaisi. So itzrich. No, I might have thought that both are talking about the king because salkadai techamina al shigas maisi yavi seir al hamdavar yavi par. I might have thought that the second section is talking about if he makes a negligent action, then he brings the goat. If he makes a negligent ruling, though, he might bring a bull. Therefore, Kamash Malon, we clarify that no, the goat is always brought when the king does his avera, and the bull belongs to the Kohen. Ein bein meshuach b'shemen mishcha. Then the Mishnah says there's no difference between a Kohen Gadol that is become a Kohen Gadol who's been anointed and a Kohen Gadol who has been elevated to that status by putting on the garments, except for this law. So Masnisin de Rabbi Meir, this Mishnah does not follow Rabbi Meir's viewpoint. De Rabbi Meir, because it would be Rabbi Meir's viewpoint. Ha Tanya, we learn in a brisa. Beruba begodim, the Kohen Gadol who has put on the 8 garments, Mevi par, he does bring the bull, right? Our Mishnah says he does not. Rabbi Meir says he even brings the bull. Habal kol mitzvahs. Divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir says. V'lo hodu lo chum, the chum did not agree with him. My time, Rabbi Meir. Why does Rabbi Meir hold that? Detanya, we learned in a brisa. Mashiach says in the pasuk that he's anointed. Ein li ela mashuach. b'shemen. That means only the one that is anointed in oil. B'shemen hamishcha. Meruba gadol minayin. How would I know to also include in this offering somebody who is a kohen gadol by putting on the garments? Minayin. From where? Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, HaKohen HaMashiach. He is the Kohen who is anointed. That meaning that he is the Kohen regardless of how he became the Kohen Gadol. He's the Kohen one and he's the anointed one. So, b'mai ukimte. So that means the extra Kohen comes to include the anointed Kohen Gadol and the unanointed Kohen Gadol. So b'mai ukimte. So who did you decide that our Mishnah is following? Kirabanan. Our Mishnah is following the rabbi's opinion. Okay, so the problem with that is on Yud Beis and Yud Beis, Ema Seifa, the end part of the Mishnah says, Ein ben kohen mishamish lekohen she'avar. There's no difference between the kohen who is serving currently and the kohen who used to be serving, who is no longer serving because he has been removed. Ela par Yom Kippurim v'asiras ha'efa, except for the bull of Yom Kippur, which atones for the Kohen Gadol, and also the 10th of an ephah offering that's brought on a daily basis by the Kohen Gadol, not by anybody else. So that is Asan l'Rabbi Meir. That opinion follows Rabbi Meir. Detanya, because we learned in a brisa, irabo pasol beKohen Gadol, the avar. Let's say the Kohen Gadol becomes puzzle for some reason, and they appointed another one. For avar, uminu Kohen acher taktav, they appointed another one. Harishon chozer la'avodaso. Then, right when the first one gets better, so the first one goes back to his service. Vasheni kol mitzvos kahuna alav, and the second one can still do all of the mitzvos of kahuna. He does all of the other things, right? Except for those two things. He does everything else. Rabbi says. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says, Rishon chozer lavodaso. The first one goes back. Sheni eno roi lo lekohen gadol velo lekohen hedjot. The second one goes into a no man's land. He is not a kohen gadol anymore. He's not a regular kohen. He serves in neither capacity. Amar Rabbi Yossi, right? So Rabbi Yossi said that Maisa Yosef ben Elim, there was a story of that happened like this, of Yosef ben Elim mitzipori she'irabo pasul bekohen gadol. There was a invalidation to the kohen gadol, and they took him off. And what they did was v'avar minu acher tachtav, they put another guy instead. V'lo inichu achiv hakohanim lios lo kohen gadol v'lo kohen hedjot. And now this Yosef ben what was his name? It was Yosef ben Elim. Yosef ben Elim was not allowed to be a Kohen Gadol or to be a regular Kohen. Kohen Gadol mishum Eva. He couldn't be the Kohen Gadol because the other Kohen Gadol would be jealous of him. Kohen Hedjot, he couldn't be a regular Kohen. Mishum Malin Bakodesh Vein Moridim. Once you are raised in holiness, you can't go back down. So that means that whose opinion is in our Mishnah that says that the Kohen Gadol, the new Kohen Gadol, serves? Not Rabbi Yossi, it's Rabbi Meir's opinion. So that means that the beginning, Reisha is Rabbanan v'Sefer Rabbi Meir. So that means the beginning is going to be following the rabbi's opinion, and the end is following Rabbi Meir's opinion, which seems unusual. Amar Rav Chisda says, yes, that's exactly what's happening. Reisha Rabbanan v'Sefer Rabbi Meir, the beginning is the Rabbanan, the end is Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yossi says, no, this really is all Rebbe's version of the Mishnah, right? Rebbe's Mishnah says, Nesivle Aliba de Tanai, he holds on opposite sides of this dispute. That's why Rebbe holds that the halacha is like Rebbe, the Chachamim in one case, and it's like Rebbe Meir in the second case, and therefore it's consistently Rebbe Meir's view. Rava says Rabbi Shimon this Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon's opinion, a third party. The Savar like Rabbi Meir bechada upoligale bechada. He holds like Rabbi Meir in one situation, and he disagrees in another situation. Ditanya, as we learned in a brisa, Devarim shebein kohen gadol lekohen hedyot. The differences between a kohen gadol and a regular kohen. Eluhem, these are them. These are the differences. Parabal kol mitzvos. First of all, the kohen gadol brings this bull offering when he makes an erroneous ruling and follows it. Upar Yom Kippurim, he brings a bull on Yom Kippur that atones for him and his family. Vasiras ha'efa, the 10th of an ephah offering that the kohen gadol brings on a daily basis. Velo porea velo porim. He doesn't grow his hair long, and he cannot rip his garments out of mourning. However, what he does do is he does do a form of tearing his garments from the bottom, not from the top. Normally, when somebody tears for a mace for a person who died, he tears near the neck of his garment. He doesn't tear from the bottom, but this Kohen Gadol tears from the bottom instead. The hedyot milmala, the hedyot, he does tear from the top. The ein matami likrovim, and the Kohen Gadol cannot become impure to his relatives. Umuzhar al habesula, and he is also prohibited from. He's warned that he has to marry a woman who has never had relations before. And also he's prohibited from marrying a widow. Obviously, a widow is not just somebody who's had relations before, but somebody could be married and then they could remember that we have Erisin and Nisuin, which we learned before. So somebody could be engaged and then they die. That person, that woman becomes an almana. She becomes a widow, despite the fact that they've never lived together. And she's unable to marry a Kohen Gadol. And if he dies, then the person who kills accidentally returns from the Ir Nidachas, from the city of refuge. Umakriv onein, and the Kohen Gadol serves in the Beis Hamikdash, but he cannot eat vena ochel. He can't eat the sacrifices. He can still serve in the Beis Hamikdash when he has a relative that dies, right before the funeral, so he can still serve. Ve'eno cholek, makriv cholak. Barosh, he doesn't divide, right? Makriv chilek barosh, he takes a portion first, whatever he wants of the offerings he can take. Venota chilek barosh, he can do whatever offerings he wants, and he can take whatever portion of the offerings he wants. Umishamish bishmona kelim, and he wears 8 garments when he does the service. V'chol avodas yom kippur meina kshira ella bo. And all of the service on Yom Kippur must be done by the Kohen Gadol. Upater al tumas mikdash ukdashov, and he is exempt from bringing any offerings, as we've discussed before, for coming in contact while he's tameh with any of the holy items. He doesn't have a korban for that because we said he's potter, he's exempt from a korban olav yored because he can't be unwealthy, right? He's a wealthy person. The kula noagin b'meruba begadim, and all of these rules apply whether he's the Kohen Gadol because of putting on the garments. Chutz mipar. Or maybe I'll call mitzvos, except for the bull offering, who, if he makes an erroneous ruling and follows it, the chula noagin b'mashiach she'avar. All of these also apply for the anointed Kohen who was the replacement, the understudy. Chutz mipar Yom Kippurim, except for the bull offering on Yom Kippur, which he does not bring, and which he's not a part of. Basir seif on the 10th of a flour, offer the 10th of an eighth of a flour that the Kohen brings every day. The kulan ein nohagin b'mishuach milchama. All of these are not applicable to the Kohen. He's not like and he doesn't do it of the Kohen who gets anointed in order to make the speech before the war. He doesn't do any of these things. Chutz mihei dvar mamurim b'parsha, except for the 5 things that are written in the portion about the Kohen Gadol, which is lo poreya v'lo porim. He can't grow his hair long. He can't tear his garments. Vein metame lekrovim. He can't come in contact with his dead relatives. Umuzar al basula. He has to marry a basula. Ve'aser balmanan. He's prohibited to marry a widow. Umachzir serotzeach. And if he dies, also the people in the Ir Nidachas, the people in the city of refuge, go free. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda says. The Chacham said, Eino machzir, he does not. If he dies, if he's the Kohen Meshuach Melchama, that person dies. That type of Kohen does not allow people to come out of the city of refuge. V'hai mimai derbi Shimoni. So now, you're going to suggest this is Rabbi Shimon's opinion, right? This is because this whole view we just explained follows everything that our Mishnah says. It's all Rabbi Shimon's position. So how do you know that's Rabbi Shimon? So Amar Rav Papa, man shmas le de Amar Pater al Tumas Mikdash Ukdoshav. Who are these Chachamim, right? Rabbi Yehuda said one thing. Chachamim, they disagreed with everything that Rabbi Yehuda said, minus one part. Why is it that you're assuming it's Rabbi Shimon? The answer is because who is the opinion that holds that the Kohen Gadol is exempt from a korban olav yored, from the elevated offering? That we said was an argument, 3-way argument between Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shimon. And so this is Rabbi Shimon's point. This is Rabbi Shimon's point of view. So therefore, it's Rabbi Shimon. So therefore, this brisa goes according to Rabbi Shimon, and this brisa agrees with everything that's in our Mishnah. Hence, our Mishnah is following Rabbi Shimon's perspective. Okay, so that's good. Chutz mihei dvar mamurim beparsha. The 5 things, right? He is allowed the Kohen Meshuach Melchama, the guy who's anointed for making the speech to go to war. He's exempt from all the Kohen restrictions except for the 5 things that are written in the Torah about a Kohen Gadol, right? We mentioned those things. Minani mili, where do we learn this from? The Tanur Rabbanan, because we look at that parsha. The pasuk says the Kohen Hagadol me'echov, a Kohen who is the greater than his brothers. Zeh Kohen Gadol asher yutzak. That's talking about the Kohen Gadol. Asher yutzak al Rosh Hashemen, that the oil was anointed on his head, Hamishcha, Zemeshuach Milchama, that comes to include the other Kohen who's not greater than his brothers, but he has oil poured on his head. That's the one who is making the speech of war. Umali Es yado lilboshes habegadim, and then it continues. The pasuk says that also the one who is filled in his hand to wear the garment, meaning Zemaruba begadim, the one who became the Kohen Gadol by wearing the garments. Al kulan huomer, on all of those, it is included in that portion. Talk about all of those three types of Kohen Gadols. Rosho lo yifra, he cannot let his hair grow long. With vagadav lo yifrom, he cannot tear his garments. Vakol nafshos mes lo yavo, he can't come in contact with his deceased relatives. Yachol yehu kulan makrivin onanim, you might think that all of them are still able to bring korbanos in the Beis Hamikdash when a relative dies, like the Kohen Gadol. Tamid Lomar, the pasuk says, ki nezer shemen mishchas elokov alav, because the crown of the oil, that's anointing oil, is upon him. Velo al chavero, not the other Kohanim, only the Kohen who is anointed to become the Kohen Gadol. He's the only one. The achar shechalku hakosov yochol lo yehe mitzuva al besula. Now that the pasuk has said, okay, well, there's two different types of Kohanim. Some of these mitzvahs are going to apply to some Kohanim, some of them are not. So then now you have to question each and every one of them, which one applies to whom. So you might think that now marrying a basula, marrying somebody who's never had relations, is also maybe something only applicable to the Kohen Gadol that's been anointed with oil. Talmud Lomar vehu. Therefore, the pasuk says, and he, meaning to include another he. He's also included in that. So kitanai, right? This is a argument amongst the Tanaim, how to interpret these psukim and determine who's included in these prohibitions and who's not. Vehu isha bibsuleha yikach. The pasuk says about a Kohen that he has to marry a woman who is a besula. Achar shecholak hakosov. Now that the Torah says that and has differentiated between the Kohen who has been anointed for battle and the Kohen that's regular, the Kohen Gadol. Reba. Then it comes back and says, and he also cannot marry a besula, right? It includes him back in. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, that's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Rabbi Akiva disagrees though. Ainli elish over machmas kiryo. So we would have thought, right, if a Kohen is removed because he's temporarily tummy, for example, he has a seminal emission, now he's temporarily tummy, he's not the acting Kohen Gadol for a day, he's got to go to the mikveh that day, comes back tomorrow, ready to resume his responsibilities. Machmas mumin minayin. But maybe a Kohen who has been removed because he has blemishes, so maybe that's a more permanent removal. And maybe he loses the obligation to keep all of these Kohen Gadol commandments. Talmud Lomar, therefore, he says vehu. That's what he uses the word vehu to include. He says all Kohanim that were removed and then return to their status of Kohen Gadol again and have to keep all of these commandments from the word vehu. Well, if he uses the word vehu for that, he can't use the word vehu to include the anointed speech-making Kohen for war, right? That Kohen is now excluded. So therefore, he doesn't have to worry about these five things. Rava asked Rav Nachman the question. Mashiach shenitztara, let's say you have a anointed Kohen who becomes gets tsaras, right? He now has this tsaras disease. Mahu be'almana. Can he now marry a widow? Is he allowed to? Right? Midcha dachi or mifter potter. Is his kahuna temporarily suspended, or is he permanently eliminated from it? Right? That's the question. If he's temporarily suspended from it, so then when the tsaras goes away, he's going to wind up not being able to stay married to her. However, if it's permanent, right? Once he gets tsaras, now his removal from being a Kohen Gadol becomes permanent. So even when he gets healed, he's not the Kohen Gadol anymore, and he can stay married to his wife, the almana, the widow. So lo hava biyadeh, he didn't know the answer to that question. Zimnin havid Yosef Rav Papa umikimiboile. So one time Rav Papa was sitting there, and he was asked the following question: Huna brei the Rav Nachman Rav Papa. Huna, his son of Rav Nachman, said to Rav Papa, Tanina, we learned, Ainli Elisha over Machmas Kiryo, right? The only type of Kohen who's being included in all of these five prohibitions is the one who was temporarily removed because he had a seminal emission. Avar Machmas Mumin Minayin, but what if he's removed for some other blemishes? Talmud Lomar, Vehu. So therefore the pasuk says, Vehu, to include and say, if he's been removed for some other blemish, he's still included in these prohibitions. Hence, Kohen also has tsaras, is included in these prohibitions. Kam nashke bereshe v'yohiv le barsei. So Rav Papa got very excited, and he gave Rav Huna his daughter to marry, And that was the happy ending of the story, right? So brilliant question. Thank you for reminding me my learning. Here's my daughter. Said that's how shidduchim were done back then. Much simpler, no resumes. Says the next Mishnah. Kohen Gadol porim milamata. Kohen Gadol, when he tears his garments for somebody who dies, he tears from the bottom of his garment. Ve'ahedyot, but a regular Kohen milmala from the top of his garment. Kohen Gadol makriv onen. A Kohen Gadol can bring an offering when he is in mourning before his relative has been buried. Velo ocho, but he can't eat the korbanos. Ve'ahedyot, but a regular Kohen who's not a Kohen Gadol, lo makriv velo ocho, he cannot bring any korbanos at that point. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav. Rav says, lemata mamish. When he says, he interprets the Mishnah, when the Mishnah says the bottom, he means that he goes to the bottom of his robe, like the very bottom, and tears upward from there. Lamala, the top of the garment, he means lamala mamish, the very top of the garment. Ushmuel, Amar Shmuel says, no. Lemata mak misafa. When he says, when the bottom means that he doesn't tear the very neck part of it, but he tears below, just below. He leaves the neck intact, and then he tears a hole underneath that. Right? Mak misafa lemala, and lemala is lemala. Mak misafa, and above means above, where he actually tears the neck of the garment as well. But both the tearing below and above is near the neck. Okay, so now we have a question. We know that the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to participate in this mourning, right? He's a public character, public figure. He shouldn't be allowed to participate in this mourning. Now, I'll call a Mesim Kulon that for any person who dies, Rotza Mavdil Kami Safa Shalo, Rotza Ina Mavdil Kami Safa Shalo. If a person wants to do a tearing of his garments, right, he can tear the neck of the garment, or he doesn't have to tear the very neck. He could tear below the neck. Right? Al aviv al imo, but for his parents, mavdil, he has to cut the neck. That's a requirement. So now, kaven to be alma havi kera, that means that tearing not right at the neck, but right below the neck is considered a valid state of mourning. So that is karikan bigadav lo yifrum. But the pasuk says the Kohen Gadol cannot tear his garments. So therefore, I understand if you're telling me he's tearing from the bottom, it's some kind of symbolic thing that he's doing, but it's not real tearing that would be valid. But if you're going to tell me the tear up by the neck, just skip the little neck piece, that's a valid tearing. How could he do that? The pasuk specifically says he can't. So Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda Svirale. So Shmuel is holding a Rabbi Yehuda. That's why the Amar he holds Kol Karash Je'eno Mavdil Safa Shelo Eno Ella Kara Shel Tifus. He holds like Shmuel, who says that if he doesn't tear the neck, then it's not a valid tearing at all, even if it's near the neck. Now, if he's holding like Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold that the Kohen Gadol tears at all. So he shouldn't be requiring him to tear anywhere. We learn in a brisa, if the pasuk had said, right, his head, he should not allow it to grow wild, and his garments he should not tear. I would have thought that it just means that he should not release his hair of the sota, or tear the garment of the sota, right? The Kohen does that service. He tears the garment of the woman who's suspected of adultery, and he removes her hair covering. He wouldn't necessarily assume that this pasuk is talking about himself. So Tamalomar, es rosho lo yifra. Therefore, the pasuk says, his own head he shall not let grow, ubegadav lo yifrom, and his own garments he shall not tear. Shena befriya frima kol ikar. He's not allowed to tear at all. Different Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Shmuel says, "Eno pores kederach shebnei adam pormim." Porem kederach shebnei adam pormim. He just doesn't tear like everybody else. He does some kind of tearing that's symbolic, just not like everybody else. Elohu milmata v'hedjop milmala. He goes below where everybody else goes above. So Shmuel savarla Rabbi Yehuda bechada upoligol bechada. You have to explain that Shmuel must be agreeing with Rabbi Yehuda in that tearing below the neck is not a tearing. But he disagrees because Rabbi Yehuda would say that the Kohen Gadol doesn't tear anywhere, and he holds that he must tear someplace. So he agrees with him in one thing, but disagrees in the other. Okay, says the next Mishnah, very famous. Kol atodger mechavero kodem es chavero. Whichever is the more common thing, that's what comes first, right? If you got two things, you do the more common one first. V'chol hamekudash mechavero kodem es chavero. Also, whatever is holier comes first. Par hamashiach upar Ada, if you have at the same time to bring a cow for the anointed Kohen and a cow for the congregation that the Beis Din taught erroneously. Para Mashiach Kodem, the Kohen's one comes first, the Paraida, before the bull of the community, the Chomasa for all actions. Says the Gemara. Where does that teaching come from? Amar Abai says, the Amar Kra, the Pasuk says, Milvad Olas HaBoker Asher LeOlas HaTamid. When you're bringing the Musaf offering, you bring the Musaf, and then it says, besides the morning offering that's being brought. Well, we already know that there's a morning offering being brought. Why does the pasuk have to say, oh, and this is coming besides the other offering that's brought? So, Mechti, Ksiv Olas HaBoker, Olas HaTami Lamali. I understand it's the morning offering. Why do you have to tell me it's the everyday morning offering? Hachikamer, this is what the pasuk is saying. Hachikamer Rahman, this is what the pasuk is saying. Called the Tadira Kadma. The reason why it comes first is because it's brought every day. And therefore, now you have a general rule. Something that comes more often always precedes that which comes less often. Then we said, whichever is more holy precedes the other one. Minolan, where do we know that from? Detana debe Rabbi Yishmael, we learned in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, v'kidashto, then he shall sanctify him. The whole davar shebikdusha. This is the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen is always holy, and he gets to do everything first, right? Anything that is holy, you go to, you let the Kohen do it first. Liftoach Rishon, right? If there's a speaker, right? You have to give speeches. The Kohen gives speech first, right? Ulavorech Rishon, he leads benching, right? It says that he does brachos on Torah, he gets the first aliyah. Litol Mana Yafer Rishon, he gets the first portion, he gets to take first, right? You treat the Kohen with respect. Next, Yud Gimel, Amud Aleph, Par Kohen Mashuach Upara Ida. Now you've got two bulls, one for the anointed Kohen, one for the bull of the community. So the Kohen's one goes first. Minan immediately with another. From the Torah, Rabban and rabbis learned the saraf also kasher saraf es hapar harishon. It says that you shall burn this bull just like he burned the first one. So matam and lomar harishon. Why does that have to tell me the first one? Sheyehirushon kodim lepar ha'ida b'chol masav. The answer is the first one comes first, meaning the par that we talked about before. You know, the Kohen one. If that one is around, that's the one that has to come first before this one for the community. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learned, Par Kohen Mashiach, the bull for the anointed Kohen, Upar Ha'eda, and the bull for the Beis Din that sins and the community follows him. Omdim, Par Kohen Mashiach Kodim. If both of them are present, so the one for the anointed Kohen comes first, Laparaida before the one of the community, as we said, B'chol Masa for everything. Ho Mashiach Mechaper ve'eda Mischaperes. So because the Kohen is getting an atonement, and the community is being atoned for. So Dinu Shiyaktim HaMechaper Lemischaper. It makes more sense that the Kohen who's actually getting an atonement, he's bringing an offering for his own atonement, should come before the one that is atoned for. Meaning the community is getting, they're not necessarily bringing they're being atoned for, rather than the Kohen who's actually bringing his own offering, he's getting his atonement. V'cheinu Omer, that's what the pasuk says. V'chiper ba'ado u'ba'ad beiso. The Kohen atones for himself and for his household, u'ba'al kol kahal Yisrael, and on behalf of everybody, all the nation. Right? You let the Kohen become purified first, then he can do offerings for everybody else. Right? Let him take care of his first. Parhelam davar shel tzibur kodim lepar shel avodos kochavim. If you've got a bull for this mistaken offering of Beis Din, and you've got a bull for avodah zarah, so then the bull for the other averos come first. My taima, what's the reason? Hai chatas vehai ola, because one's a sin offering and one's a burnt offering. Okay, it has a sin offering also, but the sin offering is going to come first. V'tanya we learn a brisa v'kriv es asher lechatas rishona. You should bring the korban chatas, right? We keep asher lechatas, right? That he's going to bring for an offering that which is a sin offering. The pasuk says. The full pasuk is vehevi osam el Kohen. He brings his offerings to the Kohen. V'kriv es asher lechatas rishona. He's going to bring the one for the sin offering first. So he's always going to bring a Kohen. When you've got a korban chatas to bring and a korban ola to bring, you always go with the chatas first. That's chatas takes precedence. Matam alomar. So what is it telling me? Im l'lamid shetei chatas rishona. If it's just telling me that the chatas comes first, tarei kvan namar. That's already written in another pasuk. Ves hasheni yaaseh ola kamishpat. The second one should be the Ola offering, just as it's written in this parsha. The Chatos is first, Ola is second. Ella, rather, why is it repeated and say that this is the Chatos is brought first? Zebana of. This is now telling us there's a general rule here. Kol Chatos kodmos laolos haboim imahem. Always, not just in this circumstance, when this is Avodah Zarah and he's got a Chatos and he's got an Ola, the Chatos comes first. But always, the rule always is Korban Chatos always precedes Ola. And not only that, but a sin offering which is made from birds actually comes before an Ola offering that is an animal. You might think that the animal is more significant and therefore it comes first. Not so. Always a Chatos comes before an Ola. Paravodas kochavim. Now, the bull being for serving an idolatry is kodem l'seir avodas kochavim. That comes before the goat that would be brought for community service of avodah zarah. Amai, why should that be? Hai chatos v'hai ola. One is a chatos, one is an ola, right? So therefore, the chatos comes first. Amri b'amar Rava. They said in Eretz Yisrael mishmei de Rava in the name of Rava bar Mari chatos avodas kochavim chasera aleph. The answer is, because the chatos of the avodah zarah, the reason why it doesn't come first is because it's missing an aleph. When the Torah says the word chatos, it's just spelled with one aleph missing. Chasera aleph. Lechatos ksiv. It's written lechatos without the aleph. Therefore, the Torah is hinting at us that despite the normal rule is chatos comes before ola, in this circumstance, the seir, the goat, is going to come before the bull because this sin offering is deficient. Rava Amarava says kamishpat ksiv bay. Right? The reason is because it says that it has to be kamishpat in its order. So therefore, the order is that in the way that they're written, the listed in the Torah, that since the seir avodas kochavim, that's the goat comes before in the Torah, before the bull, that's the order in which they're brought, because it says kamishpat. Okay, seir avodas kochavim. Kodem l'seir nasi. If you've got you've got the goat for avodas, for worshiping avodah zarah, and you've got to bring the goat for the nasi who does his avera. So the avodas kochavim, the goat for the avodas kochavim, comes first. My taima, what's the reason? Haitzibor v'hayachid, because one is a community offering, one's an individual offering. Community comes first. Seir nasi kodem l'seir yachid. The nasi comes before the individual's offering. My taima, why is that? Hi Melech v'Hai Hedjot. He's a king. The other guy's a regular guy, so you got to go to the king first. Seiras Yachid kodemes lekivsas Yachid. If both two people are bringing a korban, the goat comes before sheep. If one guy's got a goat that he's bringing as a sin offering, one guy's bringing a sheep as a sin offering, goat comes first. Now, the Tanya kivsas Yachid kodemes lesiras Yachid, and now we've got another place that says that the sheep comes before the goat. So which is it? So Rabbi Tanai, it's an argument between Tanaim, which one of those two comes first. Marsavar Seira Adifa, one says the goat is better than the sheep. Shekin Nisraba Eitzel Avodos Kochavim Biyachid, because that's the animal that you bring when you're worshiping idols. Means that the goat is a much stronger animal. Umar Savar Kivsa Adifa, the other one says no, sheep is better because Shekin Nisraba Be'alya, because sheep have tails. Fatty tails are burnt on the Mizbeach, and it's an extra portion to Hashem. Therefore, sheep are the more significant offering. Omer kodem lekeves habaimo. When you're bringing the korban omer, right? Then there's loaves of bread that are made from barley. Those loaves are brought before the sheep that is brought with it. An animal is brought with it. The loaves of bread are sacrificed first. Shtei alechem, the two loaves of bread, the two wheat loaves that are brought on Shavuos, kodmen lekvasim habayim mahem. Those come before the animal offerings that are brought with them. Ze'aklal, because this is the rule. Davar haba begain liyom, the thing that is caused by the day, i.e. the Omer sacrifice is caused because it's the second day of Pesach, and the Shavuos offering, the Shtei Alechem, is caused by it being Shavuos. So those come first. L'davar haba begain lechem. The animal offerings are only coming because you happen to be bringing the bread offerings, right? So the bread is caused by the meal offering is caused by the day, and then the animals are caused by the meal offering. So therefore, bring the meal offering first, because make sure that you have your priorities straight. Says the next Mishnah. Let's continue on in who comes first. Ha'ish kodem le'isha lahachios. If a man and a woman, right, you only have enough to take care of one of them to live, the man comes first. Lahashiv Aveda, and also if you're returning lost items. Va'isha kodemes leish lichsus. If two people are asking for charity, they don't have enough clothing to wear, woman comes first. Ulahotzi beis hashevi, in order to redeem somebody from hostage situation, women comes first. Bisman sheshneim omdim bekalkala. However, if both the male and the female hostages are going to be raped, ha'ish kodem leisha, then the male is before the female. Says the Gemara, why? Titana Rabbanan. Our rabbis learned, Hayahu ve'aviv v'rabo v'shevi. If he, his father, and his teacher were all in captivity, who called him l'rabo? He has to save himself first, because chayecha kodem, right? You have to take care of you have to save yourself first. That's the rule. V'rabo called him l'aviv. His Rebbe comes before his father. Imo kodemes lekulam, but his mother comes before everybody, because we said women get redeemed from hostage situations first. Chacham kodem lemelech, a wise person comes before lemelech Yisrael, a Jewish king. Chacham shemes ein lano kayotze bo. Melech Yisrael shemes kol Yisrael ruyim lemalchus. Because if a chacham dies, nobody can replace him. But the king, we can always find another king. Melech kodem lekohen gadol, the king comes before the kohen gadol. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, "Vayomer hamelech lahem kechu imachem avdei adonechem," because the king David Hamelech said to his servants when he was telling them to anoint Shlomo, he said he said take he was talking to the Kohen Gadol, and he said, take the servants of your master. He referred to himself as the master over the Kohen Gadol. Therefore, the king is before Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol kodem lenavi. Kohen Gadol comes before a navi. Shenemar's pasuk says, "Umashacho so sham tzadok Kohen v'nasan hanavi." That when they anointed Shlomo, Tzadok the Kohen Gadol was there, as well as Nasan the navi. Hiktim tzadok lenasan. Tzadok, who is the Kohen Gadol, came first. The Omer Shmana Yehoshua HaKohen HaGadol Ataveri Echa. So it says that in the pasuk that Yehoshua, the Kohen Gadol, you and your cohorts, companions, right, should listen, right? And the companion is the Navi. So therefore, you see that the Kohen Gadol is the main character, and the Navi is his accompanier. Yocho Hedyotos Hayu. You might think that they were just regular people that were there. They were men of wonder. They were navis. Vein mofis ela navi. Somebody who's wondrous is somebody who's a navi. Shneimar says, pasuk says, "V'nasan elecha os o mofis." He will give to you a miracle, wonder, or a sign. Mashuach b'shem and amishcha kolam lemubur regadim. If you have two Kohen Gadol, one has was anointed by oil, and the other one was put in the garments. Meruba begadim kodem l'mashiach, the one who is the anointed one comes first. Meruba begadim kodem l'mashiach she'avar. But a current Kohen who put on the garments comes before a Kohen Gadol who was anointed and has been removed. Right, if he's a removed status, machmas kiryo, because he has become impure. Mashiach she'avar, an anointed Kohen who has been removed, machmas kiryo, because he's impure. Kodem le'avar machmas mumo, he comes before a Kohen who's been removed because of his blemish, right? Because that's more severe. And avar machmas mumo, if the Kohen who is removed because of his blemish is kodem le'meshuach milchama, he comes before the one who's anointed for war. As we said, he's a lower level Kohen. Meshuach milchama, the one who's been anointed for war, is kodem le'skan. He's before the assistant Kohen. Skan, the assistant Kohen, is kodem le'amar kol. He's before the amar kol. My amar kol. What's an amar kol? Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says Amar Kula. He's the guy who tells everybody what to do in the Beis Hamikdash, right? He's the administrator. So that guy is next. Amar Kol, the Amar Kol is Kodem LeGizbar. He's before the treasurer, right? The executive director goes before the treasurer. And Gizbar, Kodem LeRosh Mishmar. The treasurer comes before the head of the family of Kohanim that are in the Beis Hamikdash at that time. And Rosh Mishmar, the head of the family of Kohanim, is Kodem LeRosh Beis Av. Comes before the head of the Kohanic family, and Rosh Beis Av Kodem LeKohen Hedyot, the head of the Kohanic family, is before the regular Kohen. Iboilu. So we ask the following question: the Inyan Tuma, as far as impurity goes, Sgan umashuach milchama ezemehem kodem. So let's say these two guys are walking along. You've got the assistant Kohen and the one that's been anointed for war, and they're walking along. And they come upon a dead body, right? Somebody's got to take care of it. It's a mace mitzvah. Somebody's got to take care of it. Which one of them should become impure and take care of the mace mitzvah? Right? Who's got priority there? So Amar Marzutra, Breder of Nachman. So Marzutra, the son of Nachman, said, Toshma, come listen to Tanya, we're in a brisa. Sgana Mashuach Milchama, if you've got the assistant Kohen, and you've got the one that has been anointed for war, Shahayu Mohalchim Baderach, and they're walking along the way, Upaga Behem Mace Mitzvah, and they bump into this Mace Mitzvah. Mutav Shitami Mashuach Milchama, the one who's anointed for war, he should take care of it. Because Valiyatame Sgan, don't get the assistant Kohen take care of it. Why? Shim Yerabel Psul Bekohen Godol Nichlas Sgan Umeshamech Tachtov. Because he's got to be ready. If the Kohen Godol goes out of commission, the second Kohen has to step up. But the one who's anointed for war, we presume there's no wars coming, right? You would know if there was a war coming. So we're not likely to need him. So therefore, he should take care of it. But we said before that the one who's anointed for war comes before. He's more important than the Kohen who's second. Ravina says, that's as far as helping him if he needs sustenance, right? But as far as practically speaking, he's unnecessary right now. So therefore, let's have him take care of the mace mitzvah. Next Mishnah. Kohen Kodem LaLevi. Kohen comes before Levi. Levi LiYisrael. Levi comes before Yisrael. Yisrael Mamzer, Yisrael comes before a Mamzer. Mamzer L'Nisin, the Mamzer comes before the Nisin. The Nisin were the people who tricked Yoshua into converting them when Yoshua came into the land. They pretended they were from far away. They were really people from the land, and they converted, but they were made low water carriers. Unasin is Leger. A Nisin comes before a convert. Veger LeEved Mishuchar, and a ger comes before a freed slave. Amasai, when is that? Bisman shekolim shavim. That's as long as they're of equal status. However, if the mamzer was a sage and the Kohen Gadol was a person who didn't know anything, mamzer tamid chacham kolim the Kohen Gadol amaretz. The mamzer who knows Torah exceeds the Kohen Gadol, right? The status of Torah has him jump over everybody. Says the Gemara. Kohen Kodim Levi. How do you know the Kohen comes before the Levi? Shnemar, as the pasuk says, Bnei Amram, Aaron and Moshe. The children of Amram were Aaron and Moshe. Vayavdil Aaron lahaktisho kodesh kodashim. So they separated Aaron to make him holy. He became holy of holies. So Aaron became loftier than the other Leviim. Levi Kodim LiYisrael. Levi is before Yisrael. Shnemar, pasuk says, Ba'es hahi hivdil Hashem as shevet Levi. At that time, Hashem separated out the tribe of Levi from everybody else. Yisrael Kodem Mamzer. Yisrael is before a Mamzer. Shezem Yuchas v'ze'enim Yuchas. One has relatives that he has better family relationships than the Mamzer does. Mamzer Kodem l'Nesin. The Mamzer was before Nesin because Zebami Tipa Kshera, because at least a Mamzer comes from Jewish people. V'Zebami Tipa Psula, and the Nesin was coming from these people who were not really of the people who are supposed to convert into Judaism. Nisin kolam leger. The Nisin comes before a convert because ze gadol imanu b'kedusha v'ze lo gadol imanu b'kedusha, because Nisin was raised in the Jewish culture. Convert was not raised in Jewish culture, and so therefore inherently there are deficiencies there. Ger kodem le'eved. A convert comes before a slave. Meshuchar that's been slave, because zehaya bechal arur v'zeloya bechal arur. There's a curse on those that are slaves, and he was a slave. He was in a cursed state. Amasai. Now, when we say bisman shekulan shavim, when everybody is the same, how do we know that? Amar Rav Acha Rabbi Chanina. Rach says name Rabbi Chanina. The Amar Kol, the pasuk says, Yikara hi mipninim. Right, you are valuable like pearls, which means we're going to play on the words. Mikohen Godol shenichnas lifnai v'lifnim. Mipninim, we're going to translate it as from the inside. It's more valuable. He's more valuable than a Kohen Gadol who enters into the Holy of Holies. Somebody who learns Torah is more valuable. Tanya, we learned a brisa. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai Omer. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, "Bedinu sheyakdim eved meshuchar leger." Really, a freed slave should come before a convert, shezeh gadol imanu b'kedusha, because a slave was at least raised in a Jewish household. V'zeh lo gadol imanu b'kedusha, but a convert was not raised in a Jewish household. Elazeh yebechal oror v'zeh lo yebechal oror, but a slave has been cursed, and so therefore his status is worse. Shalu Talmidav es Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. So Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok's students asked him, why does everybody want to marry a convert woman, right? Nobody wants to marry a freed slave. Why is that? Amar lehem, he says, because one was cursed, one was not. Another explanation. A woman who is a convert knew that she had an affection for the Jewish people. She was more modest in her life. Whereas a slave, she didn't think that she was ever going to become really Jewish. She wasn't as worried about modesty. Shalu Talmidav is Rabbi Elazar. So Rabbi Elazar's students asked him, why do dogs know their masters and cats don't know their masters? I know we've all been worrying about this. So why is that? So he said, we have a tradition that if somebody eats from something that mice have eaten from, he forgets his learning. Cats eat mice. So alakas kama v'kama. They're not so smart because they forget everything, right? That's why cats forget. Shalu Talmidav Esr. More questions that the students asked Rabbi Elazar. Why are all the animals picking on mice so much? And the answer is shasuran ra, because they have a bad personality. Mice. Maihi, what's the bad personality that mice have? Rava says afilu glimi gaitzi. Because what they do is they chew through garments, right? They don't need to eat garments; they need to eat food, but they destroy everything on their quest for food. Yud Gimel Mebeis, Rav Papa Amar Afilu Shufta Mara, even the handle of a spade, they'll chew through anything in order to just because. So that's their bad quality. Now that we've esalimud, there are 5 things that make you forget your learning. If you eat from something that mice have eaten from, something that cats have eaten from, you eat a heart of an animal, you eat a lot of olives, you drink the bath water after somebody gets out of it, also bad. You wash your feet with one foot on top of the other foot, right? Some also add somebody who when he goes to sleep, puts his stuff under his pillow when he goes to sleep. 5 things help you retain your learning. Pas pachmin, bread that has been fully baked with coals, on for sure, the coals themselves. I'm not quite sure what that means. You eat the coals or whatever that means, right? Or you benefit from the coals, stay warm by the coals. Somebody eats an egg that spins, which I presume to be at least soft-boiled, probably hard-boiled, below melach without salt. V'haragil b'shemen zayis, somebody who is used to using olive oil. V'haragil b'yayin b'samim, somebody who's used to using wine and fine spices. V'ashos mayim shel shiuri isa, one who drinks the water from leftover dough. Somebody who dips his finger in salt and he eats that. V'haragil b'shemen zayis, somebody who uses a lot of olive oil, misayel Rabbi Yochanan, that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Yochanan says, "Kishem shazayis mishkach limud." Just like olives help you forget your learning, shall shivim shana for 7 that you've learned for 70 years. Kach shemen zayis meishiv limud shall shivim shana. So that's how olive oil helps you remember things for 70 years. Now we have somebody who has wine and spices. Misayele l'Rava. This supports what Rava says. Rava says, "Chama v'richni pikhin." Wine and spices make you smart, right? Somebody dips his finger in salt. Says one finger. So tanai, that's a machlokas tanaim. How many fingers to dip in your salt? Rabbi Yehuda Omer achas v'lo Rabbi Yehuda says 1, not 2. Rabbi Yossi Omer shtayim v'lo shos. Rabbi Yossi says 2, not 3. The simanech, the way you can remember this machlokas is kimitza. Take your kimitza finger, fold it down, and you've got 1 finger on one side, 2 fingers on the other side. So 1 finger and 2 fingers. Asar dvarim kashim lelimud. 10 things are bad for learning, right? However, tachas ha'afsar hagamal, one who passes under the rope that they use to lead the camel with. If you walk under that rope, that's bad. The koshkin tachas gamal asma. For sure, if you walk under a camel itself, that's for sure bad for your learning. Over bein shnei gemalim, you walk between 2 camels. However, bein shnei noshim, you walk between 2 women. Vaisha over bein shnei anoshim, and if a woman walks between 2 men. That's why traditionally people don't want to do that, right? They don't want to sit between 2 women or sit between 2 men because it's bad for your learning. Over mitachas reach rosh on the vela. If you go by the bad smell of dead of a carcass of an animal. Over tachas hagesher shelo avru tachtav mayim. You go over a bridge that has not had any water under that bridge for some time. Mem yom for 40 days. Pas shelo basho kol tzarko. You eat bread that has not been baked all the way. Basar mezuha malisteron. And if you eat meat, which is mezuha malisteron, I guess it's
greasy spoon.
With a greasy spoon, that's what it is, right? Use the greasy spoon from the meat. Don't eat meat with the greasy spoon. And if you drink from water that's passing through a graveyard, somebody looks at the face of a dead body. Some say, if you read the writing on a gravestone, and Art Scroll actually has in notes that it's interesting that this only applies to writing that is written on a gravestone. And that's probably why we engrave writing into a gravestone, right? The writing that's engraved into a gravestone isn't a problem. He also brings that if you put a rock on top of a grave, that prevents you from forgetting your learning, reading the gravestone. And that's probably where the custom comes from, that people put the rocks on gravestones when they come visit. I always thought it was like a memorial to the person, but it's potentially to prevent you from forgetting your learning. Right? A lot of amazing stuff, Jeff, we're learning, right? This is like things you're doing your whole life. And it's like, here it is.
I love this. I love it. It's extremely insightful. Extremely.
When the Nasi comes in, everybody stands. Then nobody sits down until he tells them to sit down. When the head of the Beis Din comes in, they line up in two rows until he sits in his place. So the two people, it's not the whole base measure stand, just the people who are by the aisle. When a wise person comes, everybody stands when he gets close to them, and then they sit down again until as he gets to his place. The children of Chachamim and the Talmidei Chachamim, when people need them, everybody would sit on the floor when they were learning. So stepping over people is impolite, but if they were necessary to get to something that the community needed, they were allowed to. If you had to use the bathroom, so then you're allowed to go back to your seat and walk over the people. That's considered okay. The children of the Talmidei Chachamim, that their fathers were appointed to be the people who are leaders of the community. When they have enough understanding to be able to learn from their fathers, they come and they sit before their father, facing their father, their backs to the people. But if they are too young, I suppose, or too not knowledgeable, and they can't understand, so they sit before their fathers, but they face the people. It would be disrespectful for their backs to be to the people, and if they're not understanding anyway, they may as well face the people. Rabbi Tzadok says, "Af bebeis hamishta osim osam snifim." Even when they go to parties, they are given extra seats at the head table next to their fathers as sort of like supports to be able to like the entourage. Amar Mar says, "Yatzul nichnas v'yoshev b'mkomo." If you went out to use the bathroom, you're allowed to come back. Amar Rav Papa Rabbi says, "Lo amar el ketanim." That's only you have to urinate. Aval ligedolim. But if you have to defecate, lo havale lemivdak nafshei meikara. You should have checked to make sure you had to go before you got there, right? Damar Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda saying Rav, liolam yilmad adam atzmo lahashkim lahariv. Person should get used to being regular, going to the bathroom in the morning and in the evening. Kadesh lo yisrachek. So he shouldn't have to in the daytime go to away from the people in order to find privacy and be in a dangerous situation. However, Ha'idna, nowadays, people are weaker. They don't have the physical capacity to do that. Afilu gedolim nami, people are allowed to return their place even if they have to defecate. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Tzadok, Omer. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Tzadok says, Af beis hamishta osim osam snifim, that we're allowed to make into like an entourage by the party. Amar Rav says, B'chai avihem bifnei avim. That's when their fathers are alive. In when their fathers are present. Rabbi Yochanan says, this whole teaching about all this honor that was given, that was said in the time of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Nasi. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel at the time was the Nasi. Rabbi Meir Chacham. Rabbi Meir was the Chacham, and Rabbi Nassan Av Beis Din. Rabbi Nassan was the Av Beis Din. Ki haver Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Hasam. When Rabbi Shimon was there, Havu Kaimi Kuli Alma Mikame. Everybody would get up when he would walk in. Ki haver Aili Rabbi Meir Rabbi Nassan Havu Kaimi Kuli Alma Mikamayu. When Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Nassan would get in, everybody would get up also. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel did not like that. Lo boy limihave hekera bein dili ledidhu. There should be some recognized difference of status between me and them. So Tikkun Ha Masnisa. So he wrote this Mishnah. He established these protocols to make a difference between the Nasi and everybody else. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Nassim weren't there that day that they made these new rules. Lamakar, they came in the next day. They came in and everybody wasn't standing. So Kid Regila, like they were used to before, with Kid Regila Milsa. Amri Maihai, they said, what's going on? Amru Lahu, they said to them, Hachi Tikkun Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. This is where Rabbi Shimon Gamliel made this rule. Amar le Rabbi Meir le Rabbi Nassan. Rabbi Meir said Rabbi Nassan, Ana Chacham ve'at av basin. Look, I'm the sage. You're the head of the basin. Niskin Milsa kiladi done. Let's figure some. Let's make a plot here. We're going to hatch a plot together. My novidle. What should we do? Nema le goli uktim delace le. What we should do is let's go tomorrow and say, hey, we want to learn Maseches Uktim. And we know that Rashi Gamliel doesn't know Maseches Uktim. So, Kavan de lo Gomar, since he hasn't learned it, Namele, we're going to get up and we're going to say, Mi Yemela Gvurus Hashem, Yashmiya Kol Tilaso. Who should speak the strength of Hashem? Somebody who knows all of his praises. Lami no Lamal Gvurus Hashem. Who's the one who should be speaking? Mishiyach Lashmiya Kol Tilaso. Somebody who knows everything. He doesn't know everything. Nabre, and we'll get rid of him. The Havi Ana Av Basin, and then I'll move up. Rameir says, I'll become the Av Basin, that Nasi, and you can move up to become the Nasi. Sham Inhu Rabbi Yaakov ben Karshi. Rabbi Yaakov ben Karshi was sitting there. He overheard the plot. Amar Dilma Chas V'Shalom Asya Milsali de Kisufa. He was worried that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would get embarrassed, so he didn't like it. So Avol Yosef Achure Ila Seder Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So he went and he stayed by. He went up to the upper chamber where Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was. Pashat Goras Vitana Goras. He started learning Uktin very loud, and Vitana Amar my Dekama. He says, what is going on out there? Why is all of a sudden this? And so he realized, he says there must be some kind of weird thing going on in the base medrash out there. Something weird. All of a sudden, he shows up right outside my apartment and he starts reading Uktzin. So Ya'iv Da'ateh V'Garsei. So he paid attention and he learned Maseches Uktzin that night to make sure that he knew it. Lamachar, the next day, Amrule, the trick comes, Rabbi Nassan and Meir come along. Nesi Mar V'Nisni Uktzin. He says, okay, let's learn Uktzin. Pasach V'Yamar. So he did. Start teaching Uktzin. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel returned Uktzin. Basar to Ukim, after he taught that, Amar Lu, he said to them, Iloga Mirna Kesef He says, if I did not learn Maseches Uktzin last night, you would have embarrassed me. Pakid va'afkinhu be'beit drasha. So he threw them out of the base medrash. So what happened? Havukasvi kushaisa bepitka v'shadu hasam. So they are outside the base medrash. Every time they had a question, they would write it down on a note and they would throw it into the base medrash. Mifrik, if they could answer the question, they would answer it. Delav mifrik, if they couldn't answer it, kasvi piruke v'shadu. So they would then write the answer and throw that into the base medrash. Samar Lahu Rabbi Yossi didn't like this. He says, Torah mi b'chutz, manam mi b'fim. The Torah is outside and we're inside. This doesn't make sense. Amar Lahan Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said to them, Nialinhu, okay, fine. I'll bring them back in. Mihu niknesinhu, but we got to punish them somehow. So Delo Nemru Shmas Mishmayu. We will no longer mention their names in their teachings. When they teach, we won't mention their names. Asikul Rabbi Meir Acherim. We're going to, from now on, call Rabbi Meir Acherim, Rabbi Nassan Yesh Omrim, and we're going to call Rabbi Nassan Yesh Omrim. So Achvu Lahu Bechal Maihu. So they had a dream, Rabbi Nassan and Rabbi Meir. Zilu Paisuhu Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Go apologize to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So Rabbi Nassan also. Rabbi Nassan went to apologize. Rabbi Meir lo azal. Rabbi Meir refused to apologize. Amar divrei chalomos lo malin v'lo morid. He said, it says in Maseches Brachos that dreams don't mean anything. So therefore, he didn't go over and apologize. Ki azar Rav Nassan, when Rav Nassan went to apologize, Amar le Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, Nehi da'ahani loch kamara da'avuch lemehave av beis. Look, your father's fancy belt, right? His position got you to the position of the head of the beis din. Shavinach nami nasi. You want to be the nasi also? That's not right. Don't come after my position. Masni le Rebbe Rabbi Shimon Bray. So later on, Rebbe, who was Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's son, was teaching to his son Rabbi Shimon. Achirim omrim. Others say, Iluhaya Temura, if it was a Temura, a switched korban, we're going to discuss what they're talking about, Lo Yakar, if it cannot be brought as a sacrifice. But incidentally, Amar Lo, his son said to him, Mihem Halohu Shemei Meham Anu Shosim, Ushmosam Ein Anu Maskirim. Who are these people who are drinking their water, but we don't mention their name? The others. Who are these people? So Amar Le B'ni, he said to him, my son, Adam shik bikshula kor kavod beis avicha. These are people who try to take the honor away from your fathers and the honor, your honor and the honor of your fathers. Bad people. Amar Le, so he said to him, Gam ahavtam gam sin asim gam kinasam kvar avda. He says, look, those who are the whether you love somebody, you hate somebody, they're gone. They're deceased. These people already died. So therefore, why should we keep punishing them? Their plot hasn't succeeded. We move on already. So Amar Le, so he said to him, Ha'oyev tamu charvos lanetzach. He says, the enemy is deceased, but their destruction is forever. So Amar Le, he said back to him, Hani mili hecha dahanu maisaihu. That's only if they had succeeded in their plan. But their plan didn't succeed. Rabbanan lo hani maisaihu. These people, is the people's plan, their plan didn't succeed. Right? We're still here. So therefore, it's time to forgive them. So Hadar Asni Le, Amru Mishum Rabbi Meir. So therefore he changed. He said, fine. They said in the name of Rabbi Meir, Elohaya Tamura Elohaya Karov. So they taught the Mishnah. Now he said in the name of Rabbi Meir. Amar Rava says, Afilu Rebbe Da'an Vasanahu. He said, even Rebbe, who was incredibly humble, Tana, he taught it, Amru Mishum Rabbi Meir. He taught it as they said in the name of Rabbi Meir, not Amar Rabbi Meir Lo Amar. He never went back and said Amar Rabbi Meir. Now, we'll do one more little bit, and then we'll be ready for the siyum when we get to it. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Pligu be Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel v'Rabbanan." There's an argument between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and the rabbis. Chad Amar Sinai Adif. One said that that somebody who knows all the Torah, right? Somebody who learns Daf Yomi, goes through all the Masechtas, that's the better way to learn. V'chad Amar Oker Harim Adif. The other one says somebody who uproots mountains, who gets to the bottom, the depth of the matter. That's better. Rav Yosef. Sinai. Rav Yosef was a Sinai. He knew everything. Rabba Oker Harim. Rabba was somebody who knew the depth of the matter. So Shachu L'Toman, they sent over to there, Teretz Yisrael. Ezemehem Kodem, which one should become the Rosh Yeshiva? So Shachu Lahu Sinai Adif. They said the guy who knows everything. Sinai is better. Damar Mar Hakol Tzrichem Lemari Chati. Everyone needs wheat, right? Everyone needs to be able to, right? If you don't know the basics, right? If everybody needs to know the basics, then everybody needs to get to the basic ingredients in order to be able to learn. And even still, Rav Yosef didn't accept it, right? He was himself felt too much honor. Malach Rabba Esrin V'Tarti Shnin. So Rabba became the Nasi, became in charge of everything for 22 years. The Hadar Malach Rav Yosef, Hadar Malach Rav Yosef. Then Rav Yosef finished and he took over after Rabba's death. The Chol Shnei de Malach Rabba, whenever Rabba was the king, Rav Yosef afil umnol de Beise lo cholif. That Rav never let even a bloodletter visit his home because he never wanted to take any royal privileges. Right? He wanted to make sure he honored Rabba. He never stepped on his toes. Okay, this is a place to stop. The siyum is prepared for Shabbos.
It's teed up beautifully. Yeah, that's perfect, Rabbi Loiterman.
Ready to go.
Now, wow,
every time. Every time.
That was amazing. I had assumed that we would split up this, into two parts, some tonight, some tomorrow night. But by the time we were in the middle of like Yud Gimel Amud Beis,
I told you.
I was like, I think he's going for it. He's going to go for
it. I know. I came too late. I came for the very last part of it.
Don't worry, Yehuda. We've got it recorded.
We got it. Yeah, we got it all recorded.
So I'm shaking out of fear.
So the question now, Rabbi Loiterman, is tomorrow night. Do you want to?
So I'm going to play it by ear because I'm not exactly sure what's going to be because I'll be traveling and with people and I have no idea what's going to be. Right. So if it's a